leveraging wetlands as a multi-benefit one water tool for water supply and water quality enhancement. Allison from Jacobs is going to be giving this presentation. The purpose is to share how constructed and natural wetlands can be leveraged as powerful multifunctional components of one water and alternative water supply strategies to enhance water supply reliability, improve water quality, and support regional recharge. This relates to hydrologic restoration action 2, increase fresh surface water and groundwater availability to support healthy ecosystems.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm going to stay up front because I might try to point at some point here. But it's an honor to be with you all. I grew up in this watershed just up the road in Venice. And so honestly, the waterways are what inspired me to do what I do today as an environmental engineer. I get to talk to you about my favorite subject, wetlands. So we're really looking at how can we leverage wetlands to serve as this one water tool to help drought-proof us, to augment our water supplies as this alternative water supply, and then also looking at water quality. So what is one water? Jennifer kind of already teed me up for this and talked about it, but really looking at water in a holistic way, managing it, not looking at it in silos of like, okay, here's my stormwater, here's my, wastewater effluent I have to manage, but really, how can we intertwine these? How can we think about what might be the best approach from a holistic perspective and looking across the landscape here? So why consider wetlands in one water application? Well, when you think about the water cycle, wetlands are a critical hydrologic link. Have the rainfall, it turns into stormwater runoff. The wetlands capture that. They service floodplains as well along the rivers and lakes. And then they also provide recharge to our areas. And then you have evapotranspiration, which then brings that water back into the atmosphere. And then another important point to note is that they also reduce pollutants and contaminants naturally. So wetlands are nature's kidneys. They take nutrient, heavy water, polluted water, and they remove the pollutants naturally through all these processes that you see here. Another important thing to consider is that wetlands, the water in wetlands usually is traveling through the wetland on the order of days, weeks, versus if you think about your wastewater plant, it's on an order of hours. So because of the carbon and the biological systems and because of the aerobic zones and the anaerobic zones, so zones with oxygen, without oxygen, we have all these different diversity of microbes that are transforming these pollutants and converting them. So we have really high denitrification rates, which is where the nitrate actually goes back into the air as nitrogen gas, because of the carbon from the wetland plants and the microbes that are living there feeding on the system. And so because the annual growth cycle, just many of these processes, UV degradation, sedimentation, we see a lot of removal of nutrients and pollutants naturally. And why also consider wetlands? Well, they we just were talking about some of these conventional systems, and there's a lot to consider here. We have, our chemical systems use a lot of resources, a lot of energy when we're talking, even about desalination, all of the components that go into it, and then you have residuals to manage. There's a brine concentrate that you have to figure out, do we inject it, do we blend? If you look at wastewater plants, you have your biosolids. So there's always this residual that we also have to manage, which is an additional cost in addition to energy and chemicals. Whereas natural systems rely on the sun, gravity, land, or biomass, or plants to help improve water quality. And usually it's at a lower cost because of just the natural processes that are occurring and the lack of chemicals and energy that you have to use. So since we're in Florida, I just thought it'd be important to note that this treatment wetlands technology was actually established here. Dr. Odom at the University of Florida was studying applying reclaimed water to natural cypress stones back in the 70s. At the same time, Dr. Cadlick at the University of Michigan was also evaluating this process. And what they found is that it was a symbiotic process. So the wastewater effluent was being treated, producing nutrients by the cypress domes. Meanwhile, the cypress dome's productivity or the ecology was enhanced because of the nutrients in that wastewater effluent. And so as time went on, in the 1980s, Florida got more serious about our wetlands and actually produced the wetlands application rule where you could apply treated wastewater effluent to wetlands, particularly those that were hydrologically altered. And we then see the treatment wetland technology applied to constructed wetlands. So wetlands that we're creating, they're not existing before, we're creating them. And we have the Orlando Easterly Wetlands Park, which is a beautiful park. If you ever have a chance to visit, over I think 1,000 acres. They host many wetland festivals, 5 days. But this park was established in the 1980s and treated the Iron Ridge facilities wastewater effluent for the discharge to a nearby surface water body. So then moving on, we have the EPA establishing the treatment wetlands database. With the Everglades Forever Act, we have research conducted by the South Florida Water Management District. We have the many stormwater treatment areas, the STAs, to help with nutrient reduction, particularly looking at phosphorus. And then we start to see some more of these wetland parks with Cotahatchee Wetlands down in Palm Beach County, 7 wetlands in Lakeland, and Blacksford Swamp in Jacksonville. And then moving on into the 2010s, we see an uptick in the literature of just all of studying this treatment wetland technology, and then the growth of more wetland parks as Florida sees it as a viable and innovative solution to their water management. And then most recently, we have projects like the Forgy Ranch Wetlands, Cal Wetland Recharge Park, we'll talk about in just a minute, where we're looking at really not just improving water quality, but augmenting our water supplies. And these are recharge wetlands that help to recharge groundwater. So this map here kind of shows an array of treatment wetlands across Florida. This is from our own personal database, so I'm sure I'm missing a few. We don't have the STAs all on here, but most of these are owned by cities or counties where they're using their either reclaimed water or storm water and putting it through a wetland system. Some are open to the public, some are what we call working wetlands, and they're right behind the wastewater plant. And as you can see here, I think there's a great opportunity for Southwest Florida to incorporate a few more of these treatment wetlands. Freedom Park Wetlands is not too far from here down in Naples, and it treats stormwater before it goes into the Gordon River, which has a TMDL in Naples Bay. So if you're curious to check those out, that's probably your closest one here. All right, so I'm going to kind of take you through how we can apply these wetlands to augment both groundwater supply and surface water supply. I'll start with looking at groundwater supply. And for each kind of case study, I'll show you a conceptual diagram of kind of the process or the technique. So first, with groundwater supply augmentation, we're going to look at treatment wetlands. So infill treatment wetlands are also known as groundwater recharge wetlands. These are constructed wetlands, so we create an earthen berm to impound the water, and we apply either reclaimed water or storm water to them and allow them to sheet flow through the wetland system, and then the water leaves either through infiltration or evapotranspiration. And so this infiltration allows for passive groundwater replenishment. And because of all the carbon in the soil and the anaerobic conditions here, we get really high rates of nitrate removal, and then even more absorption of pollutants as well. You can kind of think of this as almost like a sand filter under your wetlands. We kind of get 2 treatments. And so one of the largest infiltrated wetlands we have is Forgy Ranch Wetlands in Pasco County. And this system was developed to address the northern Tampa Bay water use caution area, and also to help Pasco County really manage their reclaimed water. They had excess reclaimed water in the summer when no one was irrigating. And so they needed a way to manage it. And because of the aquifer drawdowns from groundwater pumping, this area was in dire need, as you can see here, for some aquifer replenishment. And so the Forgy Ranch wetlands were designed and constructed to treat and infiltrate about 5 million gallons per day of reclaimed water. Now this matched their infiltration rate of about 1 inch per day. There's 15 cells here. You can kind of see them. They're all organically shaped. This is a natural wetland. This is a constructed wetland. We really try to make them mimic nature and how wetlands look in nature. So this system, we had a surface groundwater integrated model where we were able to see the benefit to the aquifer system. About 50% of the water went to the superficial aquifer, the other 50% to the upper Floridan. And we saw a rise in groundwater levels of about a foot or more over 3,000 acres. So this was well beyond the project site. In addition, the figure to your right is real groundwater data from beneath the wetlands looking at the nitrate levels. And so you can see this drop off and decrease in nitrate down to background levels underneath the wetland system. It started up high here. This is the wetland plants getting established, growing in. It takes a year or two for these systems to really be at their full kind of treatment capacity. So another kind of infiltration wetland system that I thought was important to note is the Kettle Wetland Recharge Park. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Silver Springs. It was the tourist attraction here in Florida before Mickey Mouse came. And it's just known for its beautiful clear waters, the monkeys that escaped from the Tarzan movie, beautiful field grass, heath grass. But over time, some of that water clarity had gotten a tinge of green, and we've seen reduced flows due to some groundwater withdrawals and increased algae, replacing some of the species there due to, some would argue, decreased flows and also nitrate pollution. So the city of Ocala decided, instead of just putting all our reclaimed water on spray fields and ribs where you're not receiving any treatment, let's send it to a recharge wetland. So this park is about 30 acres. It's permitted up to 5 MGB. And it also receives stormwater from an area that was always flooding for them. So it was a neat kind of dual use of both waters. And so it treats the water back to, removes the nutrients like I showed you earlier, but also provides aquifer recharge. As an added bonus, it's a public park. The Marion County Audubon loves it. It's on the Great Florida Birding Trail. And they have several events here and have a great Facebook and Instagram page that people like to interact with. And then, of course, many educational displays so folks can learn about where does their water come from, why are wetlands important, what are the springs, why do we care. All right, so what about in areas where maybe you can't really get that passive infiltration, or maybe you have more wet water that can actually infiltrate into the ground. So here we're looking at surface water wetlands with recharge wells. And these could be either natural wetlands that you're pulling water off of or constructed. So this concept here kind of shows the traditional surface flow wetland. This is what we originally designed for the recharge wetlands, where you have water come in at the inflow, deep zone, sheet flow across the marsh, and then exit through the outlet. So here we can connect these systems to aquifer recharge wells to help gain that benefit of recharge in areas that might be a little bit limited in infiltration. So nearby in Sarasota County, we have the Donna Bay restoration program, where we're currently under phase 3 of the aquifer recharge project. And so back in the day, Calvin Slew, my story in Florida, the Douglas Canal, and sent it out to tide and has impacted the Donna Bay estuary. And as we know, salinity matters, water quality matters, timing for our estuaries. And so this also increased the watershed of Donna Bay, sending in a surge of fresh water during storms and really impacting the ecology of the bay. So Sarasota County has been working on this project for a few years now of rerouting this flow, running it through wetlands, reducing nutrients, and then sending it to a storage facility where we can then pick up the water and provide aquifer recharge as a recharge well. From this project, we reduce significant loads of total nitrogen, 75 to 150,000 pounds per year. We're offsetting groundwater use by recharging that water and also helping with saltwater intrusion. And then, the county can consider applying for potential water supply credits. Because of the multiple benefits of this project, it received several funding sources. All right, just a little further north, I'm going to take you to Manatee County, where this is actually kind of a unique story where Flatford Swamp system actually had a little too much water, and they were seeing tree die off. And so Swift Mud, especially a project like Swift Mud, decided to take that excess water and recharge it to an aquifer recharge well, about 2 million gallons per day. And what's of interesting note is that this area is right next to the most impacted area of the Southern Water Use Caution Area. So just in a very beneficial place to replenish our water. Okay, so now we've talked a little bit about groundwater. I wanted to share, okay, what are ways that we can help with surface water augmentation? And one of the first ways, and where this was first studied, was really the rehydration and restoration of natural water. So this is kind of a conceptual view. You have your water reclamation facility treating water to reclaim water level standards. And then you have a discharge through like a valve manifold or an orifice pipe through to a natural wetland system. Now, this is permitted under the wetlands application rule. It has to meet certain loading rates and requirements. But this is another way to beneficially reuse or reclaim water to help restore the hydrology and the hydro period for the changing water levels of our wetlands. So one of the oldest systems we have is the Boot Wetland rehydration that was up in Polk County. So it takes reclaimed water from Total Waters Authorities, a Walnut Drive water reclamation facility, and applies it to 115 acre cypress gum wetland. It has a permitted capacity about 0.25 mgb, and comprehensive monitoring since 1990 has shown that there's been no degradation of the wetland habitats and really. Sorry, I don't know why on the screen it's showing up too well, but we have a total nitrogen reduction from about 10 to 1.8 milligrams per liter on average. And then for total phosphorus, 2.5 to 1.2 milligrams per liter. So about 50% for phosphorus, about 80% for total nitrogen. And then a little further north, we're up in Jacksonville now. But this is the Blacksburg Swamp. It's just another case study of where they've applied reclaimed water to about 230 acres of wetlands. And actually, because of the monitoring, they were able to increase their capacity to 6 mgd in 2021. So that's about 6 inches per week that is applied to the wetland. What's also interesting to note is that this is protective of the downstream TNL of the St. Johns River. And it was designed to, again, preserve and enhance this wetland system that had been altered. All right, so another kind of concept is to utilize surface flow wetlands to help with surface water supplies that we use as humans or where we're concerned about the environmental flows, maybe such as an MFL. And so this one is just right up the road. It's in Arcadia. It's actually under construction right now. And this is just a great story. So, you know, unfortunately, as you know, the hurricanes have come through. And City of Arcadia has been in the crosshairs of many of these hurricanes. And so they received some assistance from FEMA to take a look at their infrastructure. Unfortunately, with their existing system, which there's existing wastewater treatment facility, they had been not meeting their permit limits for ammonia and had a consent order and needed to do something about it. They're currently, you know, designing their wastewater treatment facility, but as we know, it takes time to design and then construct it. So we came up with this idea to use a treatment marsh to reduce their ammonia levels. Now we model these systems much like you model a wastewater plant, and found that for this wetland, to use a wetland, you would need about 80 acres, which we didn't necessarily have that land. But we looked into another project we had done where we had applied pure oxygen to the wetland. So we intensified it and we're able to reduce ammonia levels below the permit limit. So a perk to that is that you could then reduce your wetland area by oxygenating it. So we're able to actually fit this system to meet their ammonia limit, in 7 acres of, area that they have in the house right next to the facility. So, this project is, projected to remove about 14 tons of more nitrogen per year. And the surface water discharge that they have eventually goes to Peace River. So we're removing that load. Just kind of a neat sort of also using a wetland as a treatment unit process. It was permitted as a wastewater treatment process as well. So once they actually get their wastewater plant online and it's working, one benefit is that they can still use this system. They might not need the liquid oxygen anymore. They can, take that offline, but they can still run it as a passive system and they'll still get some polishing and nutrient benefits. All right, and then finally, we have the Clayton County or Huey wetlands, and this is where they leverage wetlands to augment surface water supplies in Clayton County, Georgia. And so this is a 260-acre constructed wetland. There used to be a land application system there, and they decided to take that out and instead put wetlands because of their treatment potential. And so they run their treated wastewater through these wetlands. And the outlet eventually goes to their reservoirs right here. And so we have about 7.2 mg return of water, and this has really helped to drought proof them. They were still at 77% of capacity even during their worst drought line record. Another interesting component of this is they were able to look at microconstituents, emerging contaminants of concern, pharmaceuticals, and saw fairly decent rates of removal through for pharmaceuticals in these wetlands. And this is well documented in the literature. We're even doing pilot studies now to look at it, but because of the numerous removal mechanisms, if you think about it, there's thousands of organic compounds that each need something a little different, but because the wetland has many removal mechanisms, and because the water is in the wetland for longer, it's in there for days, weeks, instead of hours at a wastewater plant, you get higher rates of contaminant removal. So that was just an interesting thing that we learned from this study. All right, so why wetlands besides, how they can augment your surface water supply, groundwater supply? Christine hit on it earlier. They just provide a multitude of benefits. So there's recreational opportunities, educational benefits. We talked about that earlier, getting people to understand where their water comes from, conservation. Wetlands provide flood protection. They can be drought tolerant. We have this supply already, this wastewater and reclaimed water. When we have water, we have too much of it sometimes, so we have the storm water. And then it also creates great habitat. They're often birding hotspots. Many of these wetland parks are on the Great Florida Birding Wildlife Trail. The Cotahatchee wetlands, back in the day when the wood stork was endangered, they still have a rookery of the wood storks, but it served as important habitat for them when they were still endangered. And then, of course, because of the many benefits, there's a lot of funding sources available for these systems. And then finally, just to kind of cap it off, is that I do believe that these wetlands are adaptive to society's latest needs. We can pair wetlands with intensification technologies to target certain contaminants or pollutants, or let's say we just don't have enough area, we might need a boost. And we can also look at how can they reduce PFAS. So we're doing a study right now looking at PFAS transformation through the wetlands and using a sorbent to help with that, to collect the PFAS and then settle it out in the wetland. And then finally, AI data centers. That's the newest thing we're hearing about here. And they have they have a lot of water that we need to use, but then discharge water at very high temperatures. Could wetlands be used to possibly cool this water as well? Just something to consider, and I think we need to explore further. So with that, I just wanted to conclude that wetlands really unite nature with society. They can help deliver these just resilient water solutions, and it's just another tool in your toolbox to possibly consider for our communities here in Southwest.
Any questions or comments?
I'll just start with a comment of that, you know, what we're hearing in both of these presentations is the need to store and treat more water from when and where we have too much, or when and where we need more, you know, when we have too little. So it's all about storage and treatment, right? And looking at opportunities and to tuck in more storage and treatment everywhere. And I think the one thing that I wanted to add was like reclaimed water. A lot of people might be like, well, but you know, we use reclaimed water. The problem is with reclaimed water is we only use it during the dry season. And so during the wet season, because wastewater is being turned into reclaimed water year round, when you don't need it, it needs to go somewhere. And a lot of times, and historically, it would go into a stormwater pond that would pop off into a class 3 swimmable, fishable water. The problem is a lot of times the stormwater ponds weren't really designed to provide the additional treatment. So that water would be, you know, reclaimed water is very rich in nutrients. And it would be put in a stormwater pond that wouldn't really provide adequate treatment. And then it would pop off into a class 3 water. We had situations like that. I used to work down in Naples with the Gordon River, which is impaired for nutrients. And we actually found that the reclaimed water was being disposed of in stormwater ponds that really weren't built to provide any additional capacity or treatment. And so that water was just like flowing through right into the Gordon River. So in order to fix the Gordon River impairment, we had to like go back and deal with that reclaimed water and needed to go somewhere where it could be safely stored and treated when it needs to be disposed of, which is the time of year we don't use it. So anyway, I just wanted to give that context because I think most people, when they hear reclaimed water, they're not really understanding like, why would we be disposing of reclaimed water, not using it?
Yes, yeah, and that was the exact case for Pasco County. They just had way too much in the summer, no one's using it, nobody's with it, it's going to ribs that are in a spring shed, there's no treatment. So, yeah, adding a nutrient load to the water.
Two different things. One, music to my ears, when you said the wood stork, when they were in danger, that's music to my ears. The second thing is it's an interesting paradox, talking about the reclaimed water. Unfortunately, like right now, in Venice and Sarasota County, we have watering restrictions. It also restricts watering using reclaimed water. Which means now it's a strain in our reclaimed water retention areas, which can talk about what you talk about, where it runs over to the nitrogen. If you look at our rules, you can't use reclaimed water to irrigate, but guess what? They're still flushing toilets. And so that puts a strain on the reclaimed retention. And then now we have potential flow over of nitrogen rich water. So it's a paradox we need to look at. We're making these rules that we consider that can be a real issue.
I thought reclaimed water was exempt from irrigation.
That's the last reading of the rules. I had a citizen ask me about it, and it specifically restricted it, which is a problem. I mean, it's tough enough to educate people about the water, and they just like, well, you can water if, but not, you know. I also had a citizen the other day tell me, well, you know, I have reclaimed water, but the same pipe my drinking water comes from, so I use it just for everything. And I'm like,
Oh, wow.
Particularly filling so it's good water, but you know, let's so yeah, I mean, there's education there, but also education in the rulemaking.
Yeah.
To make sure that we don't paradoxically cause a worse problem with non-use.
And so this one of the things that you shared, thank you for your presentation, that we cannot look at water and like all the different sources of water, like storm water and like our utilities water and all that in silos. And I think that oftentimes, I used to work for government, so I understand it from a different perspective. I work with developers, so I understand it from a different perspective. Oftentimes, us as elected officials and even staff don't look at it as it's a part of a whole system. So with the whole system, we got to provide solutions because what's going on with us, we're building a new wastewater plant or creating an update because when we get into rainy season, we have an overabundance of water and you can only discharge so much. And so I've been talking about how do we look at it more as a systems approach, and I think that's an educational component that needs to be put out there for staff and all elected officials to look into, we're the ones that push staff and the city managers and all that into executing solutions. And if we don't know what resources might be available, we're always gonna be doing the same thing and thinking the same way. These two presentations, will they be available to us?
Yes, they're recorded, and so we post the recordings of all guest presentations on the policy committee page. The immediate ones, and then they stay permanently on our YouTube channel, so you can query. There was a presentation last cycle or so by the engineer behind Babcock Ranch. And I thought that was also very pertinent to this, where they did just what you said. They brought in a team of engineers, ecologists, all these different park planners. They brought them all together. And they designed that community to maximize storage and treatment. I mean, it was like, okay, this soccer field, we're gonna lower it and we're gonna accept that it's gonna go underwater and we're gonna use it as additional stormwater storage during storm events. They made those decisions and planned the whole community to interconnect. It was fascinating. So I would encourage you to look on that on the YouTube channel for that presentation, but all these presentations are permanently archived there.
Thank you. A great presentation. Charlotte County, we're working really hard on the one water concept, really are, and spent a lot of money in converting our water reclamation facilities to advanced wastewater treatment so that we can irrigate wherever. Don't worry about it. Get service waters eventually. When's the deadline on this? Is it 31? The inflation, 31? The new standards on renewable? I think it is. It's something like that. One question that, we heard about it a little bit, maybe 5 years ago, but when you really look at it holistically, as a state, where are we regulation wise with direct potable reuse?
Yeah,
Where are we? I mean, there was quite a push, I think, with Senator Simpson years ago and pushing towards that. Heard a lot about it, but of course, there's a lot of pushback from the general public on that, but yeah, I think obviously it's a resource.
yeah, the rule, I think, just came out this year. So I actually was just at JEA's direct potable reuse facility up in Jacksonville. They did a demonstration plant of 1 million gallons per day. It's a phenomenal facility. I would highly recommend to go check it out. But yeah, they are starting that process, but it does require piloting and a lot of data. Yeah, there's a lot of treatment components to it, but I think it might even be a little more cost effective and energy effective than desalination, because Jacksonville did look at desal and they thought that this was a more cost effective solution for them than going full desal, because there's just a lot to consider with infrastructure too.
I get it. It's just a matter of they take advanced wastewater treatment from the water reclamation facility and do the additional treatment. That's what again, if you've got any information, get to Jennifer on any of that. I'd be curious to find out, because it is a resource that we all have. And within 5 years or so, what we'll be producing from our water reclamation facilities will be pretty good stuff.
Yeah, so I can send you the page, JEA's page on there.
Just to get some.
Yeah, and I would add that One Water Commission that I mentioned earlier, that they give updates. This is one of their priorities. And they're also working the legislative end and the regulatory ends. And so they give updates at those monthly meetings on what they're doing to try to advance initiatives like the, direct potable reuse. I want to say toilet to tap, but I know you're not supposed to say that. So.
That's exactly the problem, Jennifer, the marketing of this thing, and
right.
The public information component.
I need a shorter, easier name.
Gotta be.
Yeah.
I'm just wanting to see what.
But if you're interested in getting updates from them, let me know and I can put you together to be added to the list. And they send out both written updates and these monthly meetings that people can join and listen in on.
Well, out of our Eastport plant alone, we're going to have over right down the street here, you know, basically, 6 million, over 6 million gallons a day. So but some of that goes out. Now we've got customers on reuse, so I don't know what the net amount would be available, but you know, something to consider.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
In Glades County, we're getting ready to do an expansion on our sewer plant. We've got a companies come in and they've got an RO system, and basically, he said in a meeting last night that they just got approval from DEP that we can discharge right into surface water with this new plant. So I don't know what the cost is gonna be as far as he says it won't be any more than the typical system, but it's a whole different ballgame what they're doing. But they supposedly got a pilot thing in Southern Lakes and Highlands County that they're doing on, so we might be the experimental deal. I mean, what they're saying is and he can do this, well, they're giving us a pretty good discount because they want to get this thing passed so that they can start using it everywhere else. But, it's interesting to see that if this works, that'll be a great for everybody. A good thing, so.
Exciting.
Anyone else? Anyone online have any questions or comments? Okay, thank you so much, Allison.